This urges new African media needs to be independent and all-inclusive. Many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Dammaqaa Mokonnin held a meeting with Dr. Annette Weber, European Union Special Representative for the Horn of Africa. The Deputy Prime Minister briefed the envoy about the positive steps that the Ethiopian government has taken so far to achieve lasting peace in the country, which needs proper recognition by the EU. Rather than reciprocating the government's peace efforts, he said, the TPLF chose to attack the Afar region afresh, killing and displacing many people and destroying infrastructure. He said the European Union and the international community should hold the TPLF accountable for its wrongs in Afar that further hindered the delivery of humanitarian aid to the Tigray region. Speaking on the severe drought in some parts of the country, including the Somali region and southern Oromia, he called on humanitarian agencies and development partners to accelerate support to affected people. The special envoy on her part expressed appreciation for the positive measures the government has taken to give peace a chance. The discussion between the two sides included the peace efforts of Olusegun Obasanjo, High Representative of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission for the Horn of Africa, and the tripartite talks on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. In this regard, they noted that the peace efforts of Mr. Obasanjo and the trilateral negotiation over the dam under the auspices of the African Union need support for successful outcomes. Ethiopian ambassador in South Sudan, Ambassador Nabil Mahdi, met with Honorable Tut Gatluak, Presidential Advisor for Security Affairs, and exchanged views of common interest. During the meeting, Ambassador Nabil briefed the advisor about recent developments in Ethiopia. He mentioned that the government took initiatives to conduct an all-inclusive national dialogue to create a national consensus. Despite the government's efforts for lasting peace, the ambassador revealed the TPLF continued wreaking havoc in neighboring regions. Honorable Tut Gatluak, on his part, highlighted South Sudan's commitment to the historical relations between the two sisterly countries. He also praised Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's wise leadership in bringing tranquility back to Ethiopia.
They say, Kauleza mama, which simply means, hurry mama, please don't let them get you. Kauleza mama, Kauleza mama, Kauleza.
Africa's voice on the world stage needs to be heard loud and clear.
Kauleza mama, Kauleza mama, Kauleza mama, sheshi sabo.
I would like to propose to this august body the establishment of an African Union Continental Media House. This media house could be organized to provide authoritative news and information on our continent, fight disinformation, promote our collective agenda, and offer opportunities for Pan-African voice to be heard.
Ethiopian journalist Andualem Sisai urges emerging African media to be independent and entertain pressing matters of the continent. He underscores Africa needs to have its own media to correct wrong narratives by irresponsible media practitioners. In the recently held African Union Summit, Premier Abiy Ahmed was vocal for the establishment of a media to represent the continent. Goshu Melliso has this report.
Some Western media houses are well known for their biased reports towards Africa without considering the reality on the ground. That is why in recently held African Union Summit, Premier Abiy Ahmed was vocal for the establishment of a media to represent the continent.
I would like to propose to this august body the establishment of an African Union Continental Media House. This media house could be organized to provide authoritative news and information on our continent, fight disinformation, promote our collective agenda, and offer opportunities for Pan-African voice to be heard.
The so-called big media houses' coverage about Africa is always related to their own national agenda due to the competition of superpowers. In an exclusive interview with ETV, an independent journalist Andualam Sisay said the international African media to be established should be independent to entertain public agenda.
This media has to be loyal to the public and accountable to the public, and that it has to address the issue of the people, not the issue of the politicians, who may now say, we will finance, we will contribute this amount of money for this media house. They may come up with this idea. But at the end of the day, this media will not be in a position to criticize these governments when the people say, we are living in a regime that is illegally or unconstitutionally came to power.
Andualam underscored that Africa needs to have its own media to correct wrong narratives by the Western media.
Ownership of major media houses like the big media houses, international one, for African countries is very much critical. The problem comes when it comes to the detail of execution of this media house, mega media house. Because as they say, the detail is always in the devil. The devil is always in the detail.
However, he suggested that the proposed media will not change the wrong narratives in the short run.
In my opinion, you cannot make that media after a few years at equal level with CNN or Al Jazeera. It takes at least a decade, in my opinion, to be competent, 5 to 10 years to be competent and acceptable by African people. So it takes a lot of time. So in a short term, you cannot change this narrative. Okay. The way you change this narrative is with less investment, using the existing social media platforms. You have to, using your own local media with multilingual services, you have to release your own picture, your own reality to the whole world.
Andualam called upon African countries to support the initiative beyond their political interest and agenda to realize the Pan-African media.
Their contribution has to be supporting this initiative in the first place. There has to be a political commitment beyond their own interest or their own political agenda. They have to think that this media, when it comes on air, it will reflect the issues and the lives it showed to the world, the lives of their own people in a certain rural areas where the people, the lives of people who are neglected by those international media outlets.
African Union Media House is said to be instrumental to combat the stereotypical and negative media representation of the continent.
Various African leaders have been pushing for a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, and the call, which hasn't yet been answered, will continue. Talking to ETV, peace and conflict analyst Degafe Debalke suggests that African call to have a permanent seat at the UNSC needs to have a diplomatic framework and be systematic. Degafe also underlines that Africa requests not the goodwill of Western countries. It is asking for equal seat at the UNSC as an equal partner. Jerusalem Betzaha has the following account.
All 54 African countries are among the 193 member states, of which only Russia, the US, China, and the United Kingdom and France are permanent members of the UN Security Council and highest decision-making body. That's why African leaders have time and again tried to push for a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council.
We come to the United Nations, it's ceremonial. Every year, September, we are there. We pay lots of money to go there. And to the General Assembly, we make speeches, we go back home, year in, year out. But the bosses in the Security Council say, you shall never have the powers that we have as permanent members. And we have asked and asked and asked. And asked and asked. Reform the Security Council.
On the 75th anniversary of the UN, we repeat our call for greater representation of African countries on the Security Council, and that this be taken up with urgency at the intergovernmental negotiation.
Today, more than 7 decades after the creation of United Nations, Africa remains a junior partner without meaningful input or role in the system of international governance. This is particularly true of the United Nations, where Africa lacks representation on the Security Council and is underrepresented in a variety of ways. It is the right time to reform and revitalize the United Nations system to reflect current global realities and ensure that it is a more representative and equitable body. Only fair representation and transparency in those institutions can usher in a just era in multilateralism.
However, peace and conflict analyst Rigathi Dabalke said that African call to have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council needs to have a diplomatic framework and be systematic.
This question is not just a slogan. It has to be a systemic, it has to be a diplomatic plan to campaign for this. It has to be diplomatic framework, citizens framework. Resources has to be allocated. United Nations system is the most undemocratic system. And things take time to go through the process. So African leaders, the AU, African citizens has to be prepared for this in unison as one force pushing in the same direction. So if we do that, I'm quite certain that Africa will get its place in the international arena.
Africa, with 1.3 billion people, is not well represented at the UN Security Council. Therefore, the views and thoughts of large African people cannot be heard at that high level in the same way as the views of the countries which have the veto rights are heard. Thus, some veto-powered countries so far have tried to waste the hands of Africa to pursue their hidden agenda. That's why Dabalke said Africa requests its right to have equal seat on the table as equal partner, not the goodwill of Western states.
What Africa is asking today is not a donation or a goodwill from Western countries. It's right to have the right place at the right international order. So I'm very encouraged by the voices that have been raised to make sure that Africa has a place within the United Nations system, not some kind of token place, but equal, sitting at the table as equal partners. It's not just the willingness of the West that gives Africa the space, but it's entitled to Africa, given the size of the continent, given the number of population, given the influence and the resources and so on and so forth.
Reacting on the significance of Africa's permanent seat at the UN Security Council, the scholar had to say.
It takes organized work. It takes systemic work. It takes diplomatic work. If all of that is accomplished, I think within a short period of time, Africa can sit at the right chair, at the right spot at the United Nations Security Council, and also play a key role, not just on issues of Africa, but on issues of global concern, global security, global economic frameworks, and global development, whether it be climate change and other issues.
The scholar further stressed that Africans to stand in unison and voice the continent's issues at the international arena.
It is the right time to reform and revitalize the United Nations system to reflect current global realities and ensure that it is a more representative and equitable body. With our Esluini Consensus of 2005, we should collectively insist that Africa's reasonable request for no less than 2 permanent seats and 5 non-permanent seats in the UN Security Council be adopted.
Welcome back. Tanzanian Vice President was one of the participants in the 35th AU Leaders Summit held in Addis Ababa recently. Talking to ENA, Innocent Izumi, Tanzanian ambassador to Ethiopia, said that Vice President of Tanzania praised the government of Ethiopia and its people for their warm welcome and company for the 35th Leaders AU Summit held in Addis Ababa. Shagao Yamatao has the detail.
Tanzanian Vice President was one of the participants on the 35th AU Leaders Summit held in Addis Ababa recently. Talking to Ethiopian news agency Innocent Izumi, Tanzanian ambassador to Ethiopia, said that Vice President of Tanzania praised the government of Ethiopia and its people for their warm welcome and farewell for the 35th Leaders AU Summit held in Addis Ababa. The ambassador reminded that the Ethiopian President Sahle-Work Zewde made a visit in Tanzania that strengthened the bilateral ties between the two countries a year ago. He also noted that the two nations are working on trade, agriculture and investment sectors in unison.
The relationships between Tanzania and Ethiopia are good, and we really appreciate the bonds of friendship that exist between our countries. And our relationship with Ethiopia have been there since 1960s, and we really thank our forefathers for their vision and mission in fostering these relationships. There are so many areas. And we are glad even the president of Ethiopia visited the United Republic of Tanzania in January 2020, and we discussed a number of issues of cooperation, including trade, investment, agriculture. There are so many areas, but currently we are working on having a joint permanent commission between our two countries, so that to avail new areas of cooperation in these areas.
Ambassador Innocent Izumi stated that Ethiopia and Tanzania will strive to realize issues raised on the 35th AU Leaders Summit. He also noted that it is time to bring African unity to tackle challenges in unison faced the continent.
One of the important item in that is to have one voice. To have one voice and working together as a continent. We join our hands, we join our efforts in addressing these issues. Once we go together, definitely we will be able to address them. And another thing is solidarity. Solidarity is very important, and also recognizing the importance of working together.
Ethiopia and Tanzania are now working to form shared diplomatic commissions that boosts the expansion and bilateral ties on various sectors between the two countries.
Oromia Regional State Chief Shimellis Abdiisa handed over 100 million birr support to Amhara Regional State President Dr. Yilqal Kafale. At the same time, Shimellis Abdiisa mentioned that the resilience of Ethiopians against the terrorist group retaliation proves the strength of the rest of Ethiopians. Shimellis stated that his region would continue to strengthen its support for the ongoing rehabilitation efforts in the Amhara region. In a similar development, in their press release, the president of the Amhara Regional State, Dr. Yilqal Kafale, stated that they have agreed to work together with the Oromia Regional State on security and development issues for Ethiopian unity will be ensured through cooperation. Oromia Regional State Chief Shimellis Abdiisa urges the people of Amhara and Oromia regions to reject extremism and respect Ethiopia. He said the two sides have agreed to work together for development and security in neighboring areas as well. In business, conflicts in Ethiopia have had a huge strain on the country's economy, limiting its annual growth to just 2% by 2021, not seen in the past 2 decades. The Economist Intelligence Unit has unveiled its report on Ethiopian economy. Ethiopia should maintain a stable market and trade system by